What is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word Nintendo? I mean, it's almost like McDonald's in the food industry. When you hear the word Nintendo in the gaming industry, you just think of one of the most successful video game companies of all time. One of the most iconic worldwide, right? But just how well do you guys know this company? How well do you know the past, the history of Nintendo? Well, after this video today, if you stick with me through the whole thing, you're going to know it very well. Welcome to the page, everybody. Chaos. Today, we are going to go over 20 crazy Nintendo facts that there's a chance you didn't know every one of these. So watch all the way through the entire video. You let me know in the comments how many of these you actually did know and how many of them actually shocked you. Be sure to drop a like on the video if you like these fact videos in the gaming sector. We can do more. You just give me suggestions. And let's get started. At number 20, Nintendo started as a playing card company. Now, this is an easy Google. Most of you probably know this. Despite being known as a video game company, it is actually well over 100 years old. I've been to the Nintendo store downtown New York City, Times Square. I've seen the old cards. I can verify this. It actually started out as a playing card manufacturer in the late 1800s. That's right. Western times, guys. Seriously. They eventually moved into board games and then various toys, but the company was over 70 years old by the time they actually made their first video game. And they've obviously never looked back since. But now you know that Nintendo was making games long before video games were invented. How does that make you feel? Fact number 19. Mario's original name was not Mario. It was Jumpman. Mario's first appearance in the video game was in 1981 with the arcade game Donkey Kong. However, his name could only be found in the game's instructions of the English version. The original Japanese version of Donkey Kong left Mario completely unnamed. But in the English version, he was referred to simply as Jumpman, not Michael Jordan Jumpman, Mario Jumpman. Eventually, the name was officially changed to Little Mario in the Donkey Kong sales brochure, and then briefly called Mr. Video. That's right. Mario was actually called Mr. Video before later being permanently renamed to Mario. The lack of a solid name stemmed from the fact that nobody involved with the game had any idea that it would end up being so popular. But once it became clear that the character was here to stay and everybody was attached to him, the team settled on a permanent, simple, and recognizable name for their new mascot. Could you imagine him being called anything else? What if his name was Lewis? What if his name was Harold? It has to be Mario. Fact 18. Nintendo hated the Game Boy. Following the success of the NES, Nintendo wanted to branch out. They wanted to make a handheld gaming device, but according to numerous development reports, many of the engineers at that time thought this thing was terrible. Many Nintendo employees nicknamed it the Dame game. Dame was the Japanese slang for useless or hopeless. The Game Boy ended up being a huge success, of course. It proved all the haters wrong, but who would have thought that the original Game Boy haters were actually engineers that worked for Nintendo themselves? Fact 17. The Mario Bros. Power-up sound was an accident. Everyone knows the iconic sound that Mario makes when he picks up a mushroom, but did you guys know that sound was completely accidental? It was not planned. The game's composer made a mistake while recording the soundtrack, but the team absolutely loved it. They loved it so much they incorporated it into the gameplay. It's now known as one of the most iconic sounds in gaming history. Tell me another iconic sound from any video game that is up there with the power-up sound. Fact 16. The NES was the best-selling console of all time. Shouldn't be too shocking that the Nintendo Entertainment System was hands down the best-selling console of its time, and it's largely credited with ending the video game crash of the 1980s. As of 2023, the NES has sold over 61 million units, absolutely destroying just about every other game machine release prior. The only one that even comes close is the Nintendo Game & Watch, which launched 3 years prior and sold about 43 million units. But even to this day, the NES is the 13th best-selling gaming console of all time. And it absolutely stomped some future Nintendo consoles like the GameCube, the Wii U, and yes, even the N64. Fact 15. Speaking of the GameCube, it wasn't going to be called the GameCube. It was actually going to be called the Dolphin. Have you ever wondered why the most popular GameCube emulator is called Dolphin? It's because it's actually a reference to the console's original name. The system, announced in 1999 under the codename Dolphin, and many of the hardware pieces also had a fun animal-themed code names, such as the CPU codename Gecko, and the graphics processor was codenamed Flipper. In August of 2000, Nintendo re-announced the console as the GameCube to go along with its cube-shaped appearance, but the original name lives on in retro gaming community. Fact 14. Nintendo partially owned the Seattle Mariners. Yeah. During the early 90s, Major League Baseball team Seattle Mariners was in a lot of financial trouble. Desperately needed a big investor in order to avoid a buyout. And a few days before Christmas of 1991, a deal was struck between the team and Nintendo. Yeah, the game developer bought a majority stake in the team, reportedly as a way to say thank you to the state of Washington for helping Nintendo find its footing in America. Nintendo paid $100 million for the Mariners and another $25 for reorganization of the team, ultimately resulting in Nintendo holding a 60% stake in the Seattle baseball team. Now, the deal was facilitated by Hiroshi Yamauchi, and that was Nintendo's owner at the time, who reportedly had zero interest in baseball, but simply wanted to help the team out and juice the Washington state economy as a favor after how much they helped Nintendo. In early 2023, Nintendo sold most of their interest, but they do retain a 10% stake in the team to this day. That's actually pretty cool. Fact 13. The N64 was originally going to be disc-based. Now, the PlayStation made great strides in the gaming industry by moving things from cartridges to discs, which they were capable of much more storage and were obviously a lot smaller. Disc-based media was the future, but Nintendo, they chose to use cartridges for their 5th-gen console, the Nintendo 64, but originally, they were actually going to jump on the disc-based bandwagon, but Nintendo ultimately decided to go with the beefed-up cartridge system due to their uncertainty surrounding the new technology. And this wouldn't be the last time Nintendo was hesitant to use more future-proof tech in their consoles. The N64 was a huge success, and technically it was an impressive machine, but the decision to stick with cartridges instead of moving to disc-based media actually pushed some third-party publishers away during the 5th console generation. I would say that's their loss. Fact number 12. Mario was originally a licensed game. As I mentioned earlier, Mario's original name was Jumpman, but that change came after a previous idea for the game fell through. Originally, the Donkey Kong arcade game that created the entire Mario franchise was going to be a licensed game based on the classic cartoon Popeye the Sailor Man. Mario would have been Popeye, Donkey Kong would have been Bluto, and the point of the game would have been to rescue Olive Oyl. When Nintendo was denied permission to use the Popeye characters, they changed course. They made a cast of originals. So just think, if Nintendo had actually landed that Popeye deal back in the 80s, we probably never would have gotten the Super Mario franchise at all. It wouldn't exist. Fact 11. The Switch's codename was the NX. Now, some of you may have known this one, but for the longest time, Nintendo would only refer to the Switch as the NX. Following the failure of the Wii U, Nintendo needed a new console to replace it as soon as possible. And the rumors of a new system called the NX started spreading around the internet like wildfire. I mean, it was to the point that many of us thought the console was actually going to launch as the Nintendo NX. Sounds pretty cool. The new console was publicly announced in 2015 as codename NX, and it wasn't until late 2016 that the name Switch was ever said publicly. The reason behind the codename was simple. It was the 10th Nintendo console, and the Roman numeral for 10 is X. So you have the Nintendo NX. Fact number 10. The NES and the Famicom were technically different. Here's another that some of you may have known, but others may have missed. Not only is the NES known as the Famicom in Japan, but the Famicom and NES are actually technically two different consoles. Nintendo released the console in July of 1983 in Japan as the Family Computer, commonly referred to as the Famicom. And after its success, Nintendo wanted to test it out in other markets. They redesigned the machine to look more like a game machine, and they released it in North America in 1985 as the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES. So releasing the console in North America, it was a huge risk due to the gaming industry crash just a couple years prior, but the NES was a success. It's one of the main reasons the Western games industry actually exists today. Fact number 9. Kirby wasn't the original protagonist of the Kirby series. Kirby is one of the most adorable characters in gaming history, and his series of 2D platformers are some of the most influential ever made. But originally, the character you were controlling was not named Kirby. The first Kirby video game was Kirby's Dream Land for the Game Boy in 1992, but originally, the game was going to star a pink puffball named Popo. Yeah, Po. Actually, Po. 3 Po's. P-O-P-O-P-O. Po. And the franchise would have been called the Twinkle Popo series. Yeah, I'm not making this up. According to the stories, programming issues during Dreamland's development led to Popo Popo being given a placeholder sprite referred to as Kirby, although nobody on the original team seems to know why they settled on that name, but they did. To this day, nobody knows why the Kirby name stuck with the game's main character, nor is it entirely clear why the placeholder Kirby sprite ended up permanently replacing the original Popo Popo sprite, but whatever, it all worked out. Fact number 8. The Wii's original name was the Revolution. The GameCube may be one of the most iconic consoles in Nintendo's lineup, but it didn't actually sell that well. Nintendo kind of struggled during the 6 console generations, so they really needed their 7th gen effort to blow everyone out of the water, which is probably why the Wii started production as the Revolution. Not only was this meant to hype up Nintendo's planned return to dominance, but it was also a reference to the fact that this was the first video game console to primarily use motion controls. And speaking of the Wii, fact number 7. The Wii should have failed. Funny enough, just about everyone expected the Wii to flop leading up to its release in 2006, and there have been many accounts from people working on the PS3 and the Xbox 360 that basically said nobody took Nintendo seriously. It was the era of HD gaming, and both Microsoft and Sony were marketing to hardcore gamers with their new machines. So when Nintendo revealed their new motion-controlled system targeted at families and casual gamers, they were written off. They were written off by the entire industry. But ironically, the Wii ended up destroying the PS3 and 360. It sold over 100 million copies and largely restored Nintendo's reputation as the #1 name in gaming, all because of the Wii. Fact number 6. The Game Boy Advance was the first rechargeable Nintendo console. This may be hard to believe, but there was a time when handheld consoles actually required disposable batteries to run. The original Game Boy required 4 AA batteries, while the Game Boy Color managed to get that down to 2 AA batteries. It wasn't until the Game Boy Advance that Nintendo actually built the machine with a rechargeable battery, which was a massive improvement, and it helped push the system even further into the mainstream since you wouldn't have to keep burning through batteries to use it. Fact number 5. Pokemon is not the original name. I know Pokemon isn't technically a Nintendo property, but since they published all the games, we're going to put it on the list today. The Pokemon franchise was originally called Pocket Monsters, and it all started with the original video games Pocket Monsters Red version and Green version. The franchise's tagline was quickly shortened to just Pokemon, and the original games were re-released as Red and Blue. They changed the name from Pocket Monsters to Pokemon, and it was a good idea because it not only gave the franchise a recognizable and snappy title, but it also got the word monster off the box, as this likely would have pushed some parents away from buying it for their kids. I know it sounds silly now, but remember, this was the 90s. The world was a lot more innocent back then. Fact number 4. The GameCube was the first home console with a carrying handle. One of the benefits of having a video game console is the fact you can easily throw it in your backpack and take it to a friend's house, and Nintendo was banking on that during the GameCube's development. In fact, they were so confident that people were going to travel with it, they made it the very first ever video game console with a carrying handle. Now, honestly, I think it was a brilliant move. It was, because the GameCube's rather compact design made it perfect for taking with you on the go. And if you were a GameCube kid, you probably took it to your friend's house. Fact number 3. The NES Zapper was originally called the Beam Gun. I kind of like it. The Duck Hunt Zapper is one of the most iconic video game accessories of all time, but Nintendo initially was just going to call it the Beam Gun. Not only was this name super boring to a lot of people, but it also had the word gun in it, which may have angered parents who bought their kids the family-friendly game console. And it was also to comply with the 1988 U.S. law that declared that toy guns had to be unmistakably distinct from real guns. The name was changed to the Zapper, and surprise, surprise, it was a bestseller. Fact number 2. The Nintendo DS was going to have 2 Game Boy cartridge slots. One of the coolest features of the original DS was the fact that it could play Game Boy Advance games, which made it really easy to transition from one console to the next. As you probably know, the original DS had 2 cartridge slots, one on the top for DS games, one on the bottom for Game Boy games, but originally the plan was to have 2 Game Boy slots. Functionally, this wouldn't have served much of a purpose because obviously you would only have been able to play one game at a time, but it would have been convenient for carrying cartridges, I guess, and you presumably would have been able to select a game you wanted to play at the home screen the same way you selected between the DS and the Game Boy game in the final version. Now, eventually, the plans for the second GBA cartridge slot were dropped due to technical limitations and a lack of actual usefulness, and I'm pretty sure Nintendo was only going to throw that second GBA slot as a way to show off their technical skills, but ultimately, cooler heads prevailed. and the system launched with just 1 GBA slot, which is all it needed in the first place. Fact number 1. The GameCube is not a cube, my friends. I hate to break it to you, but the GameCube isn't actually a cube. Sure, it's a great name for a console, and the system is widely loved by gamers worldwide, largely for the iconic shape, but the name is actually misleading. Contrary to popular belief, the GameCube is actually closer to a rectangular prism due to its dimensions being roughly 5.9 inches by 6.3 inches by 4.3 inches exposed. Obviously, if it were truly going to be a GameCube, all three of those measurements would be identical. You were this close, Nintendo. You almost got it, and then you just misled everybody. And there you have it, my friends. Those are 20 very interesting facts about Nintendo. It's fun to look back in retrospect. It's fun to look at the history of video games. If you would like more facts videos of other things, whether it be Xbox or PlayStation or individual things in the gaming world, definitely let me know. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you very much. I'll see you soon.